Well, that's a surprise.
What's a surprise?
The intro music.
Oh, you haven't heard the intro music. It's been there. It's been there the
Really?
last couple weeks. Yep. New intro
Oh,
music.
I
Welcome.
just don't pay attention.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pop Culture Squadcast Live. We had a little blurb issue with Facebook, but it looks like we're live. Hoping that's working. And how's everybody? How are you, Mike? How are things?
I'm doing as well as anybody else in this country right now.
Well, it's not. We're gonna try. We're gonna. One of the things that we like to do, and what we do on this show, and thanks everybody for being here, watching this now or watching it later. We're gonna try not to talk about the world outside of our little dungeons here, and we'll talk
Good
about
luck.
things that are comic book related and pop culture related. But we're trying to give you a little reprieve as much as possible because I certainly need it. In the meantime, it's cold. It's very cold everywhere. It's snowing in Houston. My aunt lives in Houston. I don't think she's seen snow since she's been up here, which is probably like 40 something years ago. It's my son lives out in Western Maryland, and he texted us at like midnight last night and said that it's cold out there, and it was 1 degree. And he texted us at 8 o'clock in this morning. He says it's getting warmer, and it was 2.
Yay.
So everybody, please stay safe. Please stay with the weather and things going out west. Please, we hope everybody is safe, and in general, Pop Culture Squad will always be here for our squad members. We are inclusive, we are welcoming, we are accepting, and everyone is safe in our space.
For now.
Everyone will always be safe with us.
Depending on who our guests are and what they have to say. I'm not worried about tonight.
Right.
You never know what's going to happen. Listen, let me talk about snow for a second.
Go ahead.
Because we need something to segue off of. Decades ago, maybe 40 years ago, I was writing for a fanzine out of Texas called Tales from Texas. I had a column, and it was fun. It was great fun. And one day, the editor, I'm still living in Chicago. The editor calls me from Dallas and says, "We got a lot of snow here." And I said, "Yeah, I heard they shut down the airport." And he says, "Yeah, we got like 8 inches of snow." And I tried hard not to laugh because in Chicago, 8 inches of snow is called breakfast.
Yeah, sure.
And certainly back then. And I said, "Well, I hope you enjoy it. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity." And he said, "Yeah, it sure is. So what do I do with it?" That was Bob Wayne later on.
I love Bob Wayne.
He built a small empire of comic book stores and then tanked that and went to work for DC's marketing department. Yeah. Bob and I were very good friends back in the day. That was nice.
I like Bob. He's always been nice to me. All right. Speaking of old friends, we're going to take a minute and talk about a passing of a legend. Jules Pfeiffer's passed, and I'm going to give Mike a chance to to say something, but we have a little bit of a memorial video we're going to play for just about a second here.
Jules was an amazing man for a great many of reasons. The first and foremost for us who are watching this right now, other than his uncanny and brilliant work as a political satirist and his even more uncanny work writing The Spirit back in the late 40s, um, Jules wrote a memoir called The Great Comic Book Heroes, which was the first to reprint in color like a dozen Golden Age superhero stories. And for a lot of us, it was like 65. For a lot of us, it was the first time we got a chance to read a full story about, Plastic Man or Submariner or The Spirit, which he talked about in at great length, because that was his first job in comics. And a lot of people hadn't heard of The Spirit at that point, but they sure did afterwards. And shortly thereafter, Harvey Comics made a deal to reprint The Spirit, and collectors got very, very interested. And then, even then, decades later, or years later at the very least, we discovered how much of those great stories Jules actually wrote. His first job was working for free. I think he was about 14 for Eisner's studio, which was about the same thing that Joe Kubert did. Now let me take this forward a little bit. He went on after The Spirit to create an editorial cartoon thing for the Village Voice, which was syndicated to, I think, about 100 newspapers. I first read it in the Chicago Sun-Times. Then it got reprinted in paperback form, trade paper, sort of what was passed for trade paperbacks in those days. And one of the titles, I think the first title was Sick, Sick, Sick.
That's correct.
And Jules was branded as a sick cartoonist. So that was his response. He wasn't sick. He was just sort of liberal. I mean, he wasn't sick, sure. And he was a master storyteller. And his stuff appeared in Playboy, not the editorial cartoons, but similar work. He even did like a 3 or 4 chapter superhero series for Playboy called Hostile Man, which was heavily influenced by his work with Will Eisner. A couple of years after that, I come into the story because, of course, I'm talking, so it's going to be about me. And I had just turned 19, and I was working for the conspiracy trial, the Chicago 7 trial, or 8, depending on how you count. And, there goes the cat. Not an Eisner fan. And, I'm sorry, this gets a little hard. He did a button for us, to raise money and to support the conspiracy trial. And everybody hated one part of his art. Not by everybody, I mean those who chose to comment, but among those were the guys who ran the joint, Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and Rennie Davis and guys like that. And Abby was very insistent, and he said he just didn't like it. So I said, well, what if I just change? There was a dove being shot by an arrow, very classic liberal motif. I said, well, what if instead of having his eyebrow look up, as though he was dismayed by this assassination, I had him look down, changed his eyebrow, just moved his eyebrow so that he looked pissed about it. And everybody thought that was great, except Jules Pfeiffer.
Now, I was waiting for that one.
Oh, yeah. Now, I learned a very important lesson, which is no matter how much Abby Hoffman and people very strong-willed wants you to change an artist's work, talk to the artist first. Yeah. But I was just barely 19, and Abby and Jerry both had very strong wills So I changed it and I took the heat from Jules and I learned a lesson that thankfully I was able to take into my comics career and also whatever cartoon editing I would do for whatever publications I was working with, because we always incorporated comics and comics artists wherever I wound up.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank him for that. But actually, when I had written to him complaining when I was like 15, complaining that the Sun-Times had temporarily dropped his feature. And he said that he wrote me back a handwritten letter saying he's still getting paid for it. So he thinks they haven't dropped it. They just moved it or something. And oddly enough, a few weeks later, it was back where it belonged, where it always had been. So, okay, that's cool. But I got this handwritten letter from Jules Pfeiffer.
That's very cool.
And I was like 15,
So when you told him, when he, noticed that you changed the eyebrow, how did that?
Yeah.
Did he forgive you for this?
He was impressed.
Did he ever forgive you for it?
Oh yeah, he was impressed by the fact that I volunteered that to him.
Yeah, well, that often happens when someone has giant balls and walks into their own execution.
Yes, well put. But he was mad for the right reason. He was mad not that I had changed it, but I didn't consult him. And at that moment in my life, and we're talking about the summer of 1969, I didn't really know that. And if I were to have thought of that, I wouldn't have, because of all the blasting. Yeah. Abby and Jerry, when they wanted to really get my goat, would stand on each side of my head and scream into my ears. Different things.
That explains a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, an awful lot. Jules is one of the masters, and absolutely, I'm one of the absolute top masters. And I mentioned both Eisner and Kubert beforehand. Will spent the last years of his life doing graphic novels, original graphic novels, brilliant graphic novels, as good or better than anything he'd ever done in his career. And Joe Kubert, after Will died, picked up that position, and he started doing graphic novels for a bunch of different people. And there must have been 4 or 5 of them. I'm not sure. I'm a big Kubert fan. That doesn't mean I know how to count. And after Joe died, Jules started doing graphic novels. And I think his 4th, like I said, I can't count, just came out a couple of weeks ago. Now, one can argue that he'd been doing graphic novels since the early 60s, Passionella and just all kinds of great stuff. Monroe, which they turned into a cartoon. But I like the fact that he's sort of sanctified a tradition of old timers who really know their stuff and can really do good stuff and could really do whatever the hell they wanted after a lifetime in comics, could get out there and do that. I respect and admire Eisner for that, and Kubert, and Pfeiffer. And if not for Jules, we might not have known so much about the spirit and about the inside of the golden age of comics. One of the things that Jules said that impresses me to this very day is he regretted the fact that a lot of cartoonists were no longer writing or inking their own stuff. Or penciling. I mean, they might be writing and inking, or they might be inking and penciling. They didn't do the full job, and a lot of publishers wanted it that way. But mostly publishers wanted great stuff yesterday, so it didn't matter how how you put it together,
Right.
how the team came together, even if that team is one person. But when he wrote that when I was 15, so that too became part of my worldview on how creators work. I have always preferred the work of writer artists, or at least artists who could write, didn't always necessarily, and vice versa, because comics is a visual experience and it's a visual storytelling medium. And knowing how to write is tough, and it takes a lot of work. But knowing how to tell a story visually takes even more work. And doing it together is how you create comics. So if you'll note, and you look back at the stuff I've done, I have worked with an awful lot of writer artists. I would still do that to this very day, and I hope to. So, Jules, my God.
To Jules.
To you, my friend. To you.
Well, when I saw the news that he had passed, I knew we were going to have this segment tonight. We were going to talk about it. Programming note, stay tuned to popculturesquad.com tomorrow. Ed Cato will have his regular With Further Ado, which will be Jules Pfeiffer centered. We do have a guest tonight. I don't know that I've mentioned that. Gene Ha will be here very shortly. He's in the green room. We're going to get to one more thing before we bring him in, because we do want to get him as much time as we can tonight. I was preparing to possibly do a new number ones for this week, but there's really no new number ones this week. For some weird scheduling reason, there's only a couple of new issues. Most of them are one shots. There's only a couple of things that matter. Thanks for watching, Bill. Bill's has something to say here. But there is one book that is coming out this week that we are going to talk about, and it has something to do with something you just said, and I'm going to give you a hint.
Oh, holy crap! You're the Spectre.
No.
Esky
how about this?
From Esquire. Oh, that one. Yeah.
Oh, that one.
Oh, yeah, that one.
Oh, that one. Yeah.
We've got so many conversations this week about that format.
Which format? Which format? The
new format thing that they're doing. I know
is this in the compact format?
I think it is.
It's 400 pages. It's an omnibus. It's 400 pages.
Yes, it's an omnibus. Fun. So is the Suicide Squad that's coming out in a couple of months.
Yes, they both are.
Johnny O and I just talked at great length about his introduction and about James Gunn's introduction to that. And
we will talk about that when that comes out. Did you participate in this production?
Not at all.
Not at all. Okay.
So, they own it. It's there. Mike didn't either. You'll note that it's not an original cover.
No, it is not an original cover. It does collect 16 comics. It is, and this is my chance to talk a bit about things. This run blew my mind. The first three, and I've said this to people know how I feel about it, but the first three deluxe format series that was on whatever paper it wasn't, I don't think it was on Baxter paper, but anyway,
no, it was coated paper.
It blew my mind. It would what Mike and you and Julia produced made me change the way I looked at comics and made me understand the medium in ways I had not before. I didn't think that comics could be that. I knew that stuff that you did at first or things like outside of things. But I did not think that I would ever get this type of comic book storytelling from a mainstream superhero publisher. And you continued it with because this also collects a couple of question issues as well. I don't know if you're familiar with that part. Like there's like the Canary crossover. There's a question crossover that's in this, and like the first few issues of Green Arrow, the main series. There's some annuals in there. This changed the game, and I say that, and I talk to people my age, and they all agree. And well, I hope you get a copy. To be honest with you.
Oh, that's not going to happen. I mean, if I get a copy, I'll do it the way most humans do. But and I hope Julia gets a copy. I know Mike will. I'll tell you what really impresses me. Why I think this is a good idea. I mean, there's lots of reasons why. These are good stories, and I'm very proud of them. I know Mike is as well. Ed Hannigan and Dick Giordano drew the first year or two worth of the ongoing monthly series that Mike wrote, and I edited. And it was some of the finest work I have seen from Ed, whose work I love and admire greatly, and Dick, who's who had a half a century more of greatness. Frank McGoughan helped him, as he did on a great many things on that series, and it's nice to see it getting more attention. It has been reprinted, I think, in some of the heavier omnibuses, the ones that you throw at people while you're escaping the bank, trying to make out with the goods, with the money you just stole.
Well, I'm sorry. It's not 400. It's 600 pages. This is 600 pages in paperback form.
Oh, great! How long is it going to take the spine to break on that one?
I'm just saying, it's perfect bound trade paperback, 600 pages, $40.
Hey,
it's not bad for 16 comics.
No, for what you're getting, I don't know what size it is, but for what you're, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know the size either. That's what I was asking.
I thought you knew that. But why? That's a good value. There's no question about it. For $40 today, that's a very good value. And I think this whole program of DC's seems very interesting. Some of the books that they're doing are really, really interesting to me. I would be surprised if Neil Gaiman's Death book, which says on the cover, Neil Gaiman, Death, is actually going to come out because of Neil's situations right now.
Well, there's plenty of time.
And it's ironic.
Yeah, I mean, it is ironic. Well, we'll get to that later. But in the meantime, we have this book is coming out tomorrow. It's one of the highlights on the show or on the this week.
I didn't know it was coming out tomorrow.
It is. So at least according to where I get my info. So my info is sometimes wrong, but I believe it's coming out either tomorrow or
Diamond's not distributing it. So
yeah. Well, so then it'll probably be out tomorrow because Diamond, should I go grab the Diamond issues thing here? Because I saw just a notification that Massive Publishing, whatever they are, is no longer exclusive with Diamond as of today. I did talk to my local shop about their opinions on Diamond's. There are certain things that will bother them if Diamond goes away, but if they go away, they go away. They'll just get their comics. They'll get their distributed from somewhere else. There wasn't a terrible sense of dread and the sky is falling from my local comic shop about it.
No, if this were to have happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it would be game over. But they They don't handle DC and Marvel and Image and Dark Horse and IDW, among others. And it's kind of hard to run a comic book store if you don't have product from those publishers. I wish them well. I mean, I think I mentioned this last week. I've known Steve since he was a mailman, Steve Jeppy. And even though politically I suspect we disagree, I really love the guy. And, I don't want to see anybody have to go through this. And I know that some people are going to have a long time to wait for their money. Some are worried they won't get it at all. That's what happens with every bankruptcy. And I fear for the smaller publishers that have those IOUs. I fear for them because, at First Comics and all the other publishers at that time, when all the other distributors went out of business, we got hurt real bad that very way. But it took time because there were a lot of different distributors and they all died one by one.
Right.
So it was rough, and it killed a lot of publishers. Didn't kill First Comics completely, but they never recovered. And Eclipse and just wonderful companies. So I am concerned for the industry, but it's a great form. We will recover. We will survive this.
I think that was the feeling. It was not a sense of resignation. It was a sense of whatever's next, we'll figure it out. Like that's the feeling that I got from the people I spoke to. So
that's right. I think during this past half hour, our guest has actually had a birthday.
You think so?
Or bar mitzvah, or got married, or something. It's been so long. He's been sitting in the green room.
He has been.
We should charge him.
He's probably completed like 4 pages because I know he's probably working. So I'm going to get him, and we're going to bring him in here because I'm very excited. I'm excited for this because Gene Ha is here. He is a multi-award-winning comic book creator, and he is one of the very first people that I interviewed when I got into this business in 2019. And we're going to bring him in. We're going to let him see this craziness that we have here on the SquadCast.
Oh,
it is someone. It's the head of Superman.
No, I'm Gene Ha.
That's from
As
the
I
movie.
said, it is from the movie. It's definitely Christopher Reeve's head. It's disembodied Christopher Reeve head. Hi, Gene. How are you?
It just struck me that while I was waiting to come in that I have this coffee mug full of pencils with little doll heads on them.
Why?
Oh.
Because sometimes I need to draw a superheroic head from a weird angle, and it's nice to have a Christopher Reeve on a pencil, or a Gal Gadot, or a Michael Jordan. So just some random heads that seem
representative.
Yeah. The problem is I cannot find a distinctly African American female-looking head from the doll manufacturers easily available, but I think the actually sure she recently had one of those 12-inch dolls made, like the super photorealistic 3D scanned heads.
Nice,
right?
So these are all like $20 extra part editions from a Chinese manufacturer or a Chinese Alibaba market. So they're really cheap. To get an actually good African American female head, I'm going to probably have to below $300.
Oh boy.
Well, then I suggest get a really big pencil.
That's what they say about me.
Yeah, our friend Bill here mentioned something about you being an absolute delight. That is not an ice cream confection. It is the truth. I probably first met you at a convention because that's how you meet people. And
That's how you meet
that
people.
was that was about well, sure, they don't let me in other places. And that was like 20 years ago. And you've just been one of the greatest people to be standing next to at a convention for me, like ever. Your work speaks for itself, but you don't.
So
I'm just going to say it's fun when I get to hang out with you, Mike, in person and stuff like that over the years and stuff like that. You always have, well, two things. You have a story about everyone you've had a chance to meet, and that you've had enough time in the industry, so it kind of bridged different eras. And you keep on bridging the eras, so keep going strong. And then also you're very insightful.
Oh,
you're quick. You have a quick brain.
Yeah, it's because of these microphones. But thank you, I appreciate that.
So
I learned when I was also very young. I learned many lessons when I was like 18, 19 years old. And one of them was, if you stick me in front of a microphone, which was how old I was the first time somebody was silly enough to do that, I'm going to say something that I think is worthy of people's attention. And the older I got, the more experienced I got. I'm not sure I'm better at it, but I'm more experienced. So I can jerk people's chains in so many different directions.
So, Gene, I know you're based in Chicago or the Chicago area now.
Yes.
Is that where you're from originally? Did you grow up in that area?
I did not grow up in Chicago. I was born in Chicago and then raised in Indiana from about the age of 2.
Okay.
Where in Indiana?
Mostly in South Bend.
Okay. Really?
Yeah. So, I had the impression that, like, the national stereotype at the time was that Korean Americans were greengrocers, which I'd never seen. I got the impression I got was that everyone's dad was either a Notre Dame professor or a medical doctor.
Well, there you go. That's fair.
Yeah.
So when you, and I kind of want to get into a bunch of stuff. I want to get to May real quick, but before I get to that, were you in Chicago when you got into comics? Is that where you started? Did you go to New York? How did you break in? Because was your first published by someone else's work, that Green Lantern issue?
Well, I've always lived in the Midwest, and in a way, I've always culturally lived in the orbit of Chicago, while mostly not living in Chicago. So South Bend, everyone wants to go to Chicago to do anything. Right. Even when I went to college in Detroit, we were always going down 94 and talking about, like, we're going to make a trip to Chicago because that's going to be fun and exciting and stuff. But yeah, I started off in Detroit. The DC and Marvel were both based in New York at the time. Mm-hmm. And at the time, you could still send in your samples, and you were almost guaranteed to get back a letter saying either you have a job or you don't have a job. So it was an easy time to break
mail. Just mail. That's how you did it that way.
Yeah, you just mailed photocopies of pencil drawings or ink drawings. And that's totally against policy now, because now they're so afraid someone's going to say, you stole my idea for for Hulk inside of a Coliseum from me that I came up with 10 years after Peter David or something like that. Or and therefore I'm going to sue you, and you're going to have to put in legal fees. And so now the policy is, you send in that packet, the editors are supposed to throw it away immediately before you look at it.
Yep. That is true.
I mean, I get that. I haven't been on both sides of that. But I think that part of that is, when I was at DC, and I spent 9 years there in total, we would get about 5 tons of samples in the mail every day. I recall one smart person sending his samples to every editor on the floor and enclosing one of those little like greeting cards that you'd open up, and it would sing at you like a music box.
Oh boy!
Unfortunately, those things got sort of activated when they were put in the cards and in all different angles and stuff. So you can hear the mail guy coming down the cart with all of this bizarre music, which didn't fit together, but was all the same. And I would have shot that program down right there on the spot that very day. But
do you know who that person was? It would be great if that was somebody who became somebody.
No, but we did get good artists. When I was at first, that's where Todd McFarlane's stuff came right over, as Giordano used to call, right over the transom. People who don't know what transoms are do have phones, and you can find out within seconds. Transoms were very important at one point in time. Holy crap! There's Dean. Wow, he's right. So there. So there. Anyway,
so
yeah, I think that was to relieve us of a lot of bad ideas.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about how things worked that day. It's great that worked for you at the time and at that moment. And I want to get back to some of that in a little bit, but before we get any further, let's talk about May, because in April the definitive edition is getting published by Oni Press. If anybody hasn't read May, this is your chance. You have had a bit of a journey in publishers with May over the years. But can you tell us just a little bit about what May is about and what people can expect from it if they haven't seen it?
Okay. Yeah, May is like the book where I both wrote and drew it, and it's a real passion project of mine. And it's about I've got 2 copies here of the older edition. I'll just mention both of these are sold out. Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the older edition is sold out worldwide, which is why they have the new edition, because you can't buy a new copy. You can only buy old used library copies. And it's about 2 sisters. Oh, you got the image up out there. I don't even have to hold that up to point at them. So yeah, it's about 2 sisters. The one in the red cap is the older sister, Abby, who 8 years before the story starts, at the age of 13, found a doorway to another world. And like a lot of kids at the age of 13, if you didn't have to deal with the trauma of middle school and high school and could live in a world where you could be a hero, you probably wouldn't come back, and she doesn't. So for these 8 years, the younger sister, May, has been finishing school, taking care of their aging dad, helping the family business, until her sister comes back at the age of 21, claiming she's been in another world, fighting against mad scientists and monsters and leading barbarian warrior cats in battle, which May has a hard time believing until some of the monsters follow her back and their dad disappears, at which point she gets dragged into her sister's adventures to try to rescue their dad. And May is a geek. Abby is an action hero, so she can deal really well with a mad science fantasy world where ogres will punch you and knock you 30 feet across the plaza into a brick wall. Well, that would kill May because she's a normal person like us, so she's got to think things through. And the way she thinks things through differently than an action hero is the big dynamic of the story. And it's about thinking things through because you're a geek and knowing things because you're a geek and trying to deal with the world differently.
Just trying to deal with the world provides story enough. That's really interesting. I'm looking forward to it because I only have a copy of the second volume. So I'm really looking forward to this, and also to having my daughter read it. But that's another story.
When you've had a long career, and still look like you're 25, but
Gail Simone claims I eat babies. I'm not going to confirm that.
we're doing a lot of work for hire work, but this is something that is yours, your original story. You wrote it, you drew it. How did this story evolve for you? How did you say this is what is going to be my passion project, the thing that is going to be all me?
It just kind of started off with me doodling and frankly making kind of fan art of Kyle Baker's Why I Hate Saturn, which is about two sisters. And I grew up with brothers, so I was fascinated by both how sometimes the dynamic is the same, but also it can be very different. Like, for instance, if you have a dispute with your brothers, or at least in my household, if you had a dispute with your brothers, it usually came down to fists. Sure. And then afterwards you were fine with each other, but one of you had a bloody nose. But with sisters, usually, and with girls in general, there's a very different dynamic to how you deal with things, of trying to act like you're not different and stuff like that. I just kind of fascinated it all. But anyway, I kept on doodling these characters until I came with a different version of the characters, where instead of being a normal sister and a space girl, I somehow put a kind of a Prince Revolutionary War Napoleonic jacket on the older sister. And then I suddenly had to build a world around why she would be wearing that costume. And then at first, Abby was going to be the main character. And as we began building, kind of coming up with the ideas for the stories and how things would go, because Abby's an action hero, it felt way too much like stuff I could be doing in comic books, in superhero comics, like I'd already been doing. And it didn't seem to be saying anything new to me or saying anything that I wanted to say. And it's only when I thought it through and realized, oh, the younger sister is my main character because she's asking questions to the action hero. Why are we doing it this way? That it kind of all came together. And also, I know so many people in real life, or frankly in politics, who try to look at the world as an action hero and try to solve every problem by looking for somebody who looks like a villain and then punching them, and then imagining that'll somehow magically make the problems go away. And I wanted to ask questions of that too.
Well, it helps if they put on swastikas. Then you know who to punch.
Yeah, I mean, that may not make your problems go away, but it will make the world a better place.
Well, if you can't fix everything, go for humanity.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this. I'm very glad that Oni's doing this. Like I said, it was originally, the first volume was originally published by Dark Horse, and then you moved to Lion Forge at the time. Lion Forge has now been acquired by Oni, so now it's Oni. So Oni will put, so all three collected editions will be different publishers, which is nice. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. It's such a great story. I've read almost all of it. I don't know that I've gotten through all of it, but I've read the first 7 or 8 issues. And I love it. It fits. It's just a great story, and it evolves in the right way. And you make the motions that you just talked about, and how that works out is exactly what you were able to achieve.
Okay. Well, I'm going to mention I added 14 pages of new story for the new edition.
Oh,
so
great.
There's definitely stuff, even if you read both volumes, you haven't read it. But out of curiosity, so you've read, Bob, you said the first 8 issues. The last issue kind of ties everything together with all the major questions and threads established in the first 11 issues get answered in issue 12.
Great. That's awesome.
Mike, you said you've read the second volume, but have you read it all the way through? Because there's some twists in issue 12 where things are revealed, like this is the actual story I've been telling all along, and it's a little different than it looked like at issue 4.
I did read it all the way through.
Okay. I can get you digital reviewer copies if you'd like. So, or you can buy it or two, but you have to wait till April.
Oh, I don't want to wait till April, but I might buy it.
Go ahead, Mike.
I have to move on a tangent here because that's what I do. There was a statement that Jules Pfeiffer made in The Great Comic Book Heroes about how after Citizen Kane, everybody looked at Citizen Kane and then started to draw feelings. Ceilings were never in comics before. Now, that may or may not be true, but your ceiling certainly is on this shot. So I don't know if that was your intention. I suspect it wasn't, but right now your shot is a living tribute to Jules Pfeiffer's.
That's fair, because we see your ceiling. I get that point. So, I want to talk a little bit about. So we're gonna come back to May before we're over. But I want to talk a little bit about your career and your the way you do things. When I spoke to you the very first time, you had said that, at your experience level, you've gone mostly digital for your published work. You sketched by hand on paper at shows and stuff. How was it for you to transition from someone who grew up learning how to draw and draw comic book art on boards and paper to moving to a digital format where it's so much, where the expansion aspects are phenomenal compared to what you were used to?
Yeah. I mean, a big part of it is I don't move to digital until it doesn't have to do exactly what I do on paper, but it has to be in some way easier than what I do on paper and still be able to capture the quality of my drawing, even if it looks different. So, but part of it also is just that whole thing where getting to bifocal age, where your eye becomes a fixed focus lens. Yeah. And if I'm trying to, when I was up to about the age of 38, if I wanted to do a close-up on a drawing, I would just lean in like my face 2 inches from the paper. And nowadays I can't do that. So what I do is I just make the paper proportionally that big. And that way I can draw in details if I want to. But it just gets really painful if I'm trying to do a very detailed drawing on paper and trying to get that. Like if I'm doing a marker sketch or something at a convention or something, and if I want to get a fine detail, then you get the classic old man.
Yeah, it's funny because, if anybody's ever seen you at a convention, I know exactly what you're talking about, because you are the person who will want to get that fine detail that you're doing. Like you'll be like, running away at something, and then all of a sudden you're like, no, I gotta, and then it just it takes you over, and you have to do it the way that you want it to be done to generate it. Because I've seen you become, engaged with a piece of art while you're at a convention, which is commendable.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I admire people who I really love and admire people who draw really well, totally differently than me. Dean Haspiel earlier, posted on there, and he does these kind of bold brushstroke, Kirby-esque type illustration stuff like that. Sure. And I know he rips his heart out every time he's doing it to get it just right. But to me, it looks like he's not being a fussy little bitch like me about those little tiny details. And it just feels so emotionally free and stuff like that. But for me, it's just like, oh, if I draw this realistic hairstyle in an abstracted way and I don't capture the effort she put in to curl her hair just right, I'm not capturing the character correctly. And therefore I have to research how they curled their hair in the 40s versus how they curled it in the 50s versus how they curled it in the 1990s, and get that right, because it says something about how that woman spent her morning. And it's just there's story built into it for me where I can't not do it and get the character wrong. And then Dean seems to be just going his merry way and having the most joyous time in the world, and just feel deep jealousy and
I don't think Dean ever looks down.
Well,
I think
we both love each other's work, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He leads this magic life and draws just instinctively, intuitively. Now, I'm sure Dean feels like that's not true. That, he looks at his stuff and thinks of things very different than the rest of us do, which is true for any artist,
Right. I mean, you're your rendering is phenomenal, but it again, even though I know it looks like it's just what pours out of your hand. It's because it's so consistent, because it's so, um, you know, I can look at the art and I know that it's yours. There's something about it, even though it's a more realistic style than Dean's, which is so much more stylistic, or someone else. I don't want to pick on Dean. Even though yours is a very realistic style, it is still your style.
Yeah, I guess there's okay. There's another thing that comes to mind right now that's related, where ages ago I read an essay by Frank Herbert, the science fiction author of Dune, who talked about how if someone's going to pay him $3 for, at the time, $3 for a big, thick hardcover novel or something like that, they deserve to get multiple, way more entertainment than most books give them, and it should stand up to multiple readings and stuff like that. And that really stuck with me. And I also want to make it so, like, if you read it once, it's going to be a totally different experience than if you read it twice. And if you read it 5 times, you're still going to be seeing something different in there. And if you ask questions, and I'm fine with people never asking questions about the story beyond that first reading. But for the crazy people and the hardcore comic geeks who do dive in, there is going to be stuff for them to keep on digging into. Give me 5 seconds. I'm going to run and grab a piece of paper where I've actually drawn something on paper, and I'm going to show it to the screen.
Oh, paper. God, I remember paper.
I heard about it.
It's tough when somebody comes up with a brand new way of doing what you've been doing all your life.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we got the Atlas from Rockefeller Center on this cover.
Mm-hmm.
And DC did not want. I intuitively knew from experience that DC did not want the actual figure from the statue in it.
Right.
So that's part of the reason why I did the design this way.
This is the Jenny Sparks cover.
Yeah. But also, I thought while I was going at it, if I was going to keep on changing it, I was going to change the symbols around the middle, I can't remember what the line, the word is for the line that goes around the middle of the earth right now. It's just dropping out of my head. But anyway, yeah, those are supposed to be astrological symbols. And instead, I switched them to symbols for different team members from the Authority.
Oh, that's awesome.
And if you want to dig into my art, you're going to keep on finding stuff like that in it.
Yeah, I agree with you. We do have a comment from Ed. It says, fascinated by your work, especially your expertise with markers. I appreciate you being so generous with explaining, teaching, sharing, and exactly what you're doing right now. And that's what I kind of the other thing that I wanted to say, like when I've been in your presence at a show or around, you're always, very generous with what you know. And I know that you got that from the people who helped shape you throughout this career.
Yeah.
Throughout your career.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many people who've been kind of so generous with me, and sometimes they've kind of been bitten the butt bite over the years, so therefore they can't do it anymore. Like, Adam Hughes is just the sweetest guy in the world, but there are so many people who have lied to him to try to get a sketch out of him over the years. He's a little more guarded than he used to be. Early on, like Alex Ross is about my age, and like we traded tips and stuff like that. And then as he rose in superstar status, suddenly it was like, I can't walk through a convention anymore and have a good time. I just have to stop doing that. Things like that. So I came in at a really good time, and also when editors still had time to mentor the artists, and that was a big one too. And nowadays, editors have so many books thrown at them. And also, they're expected to be the public relations promotion department for the comic publisher, too, at the same time, and all these other things. They just don't have the time to just, like, teach artists how to be comic book storytellers. And that's what I got from, like, Kevin Dooley and Eddie Berganza. And just, like, I just got... And that I'm going to say there's a series of editors in my life through the mid-'90s where they kept teaching me. Archie Goodwin. One of the greatest teachers I ever got in my life by just working on a single well, not just a single short story with him, but that first chance I had to do a short story with him, he taught me so much on that. It was just like I sent him some rough layouts, and he said, "Okay, you're turning the first page into a series of pinups, and that's not what that first page is about. It's the slow buildup of tension. So let's pull back a bit and then do that stuff during the climax." And he taught me how to build suspense in a story, and because he wrote the story himself, I asked him to write it. He was able to explain as a writer how he was thinking and how the mechanics of the script he gave me. So yeah, I've just got really lucky, and I feel like I'd have to be a giant asshole not to share that, because unlike say Adam Hughes or Alex Ross, I have not been constantly burned by toxic fans the way they have. So they have to be more guarded. And if I don't have to be that guarded, why not be the guy who's bulletproof and gets to walk through the bullets?
I mean, go ahead.
For me, the most fulfilling part of the editor job is that mentoring aspect. And if you take that part away, it's like, well, then you don't want an editor. No, I'm not sure that's true. But you're sort of reducing the editor's job to being a paper shuffler. And that would annoy me to no end. I love working with young, new talent. Always have. And I think I always will. It's the best part of the job, and as we've said on this show quite a lot, part of our job, not just editors, but everybody in the business, is to prime the pump, is to keep us all moving forward. You mentioned something brilliant, I thought. If you read it a couple of times over the course of time, you're going to pick up stuff. Well, folks, I'm in the process right now of reading Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirates for the third time in my life, from beginning, middle to end. And yes, I'm picking up stuff all the time. It's a critical thing. You can't afford the time to read everything several times. But damn, if you're being given the opportunity to read Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirates, anytime you give that opportunity, get it, follow it. This is the best the medium has ever gotten to. And it's from a man who figured it out 20 years or almost 20 years before I was born. So, yeah, it's an important part. Good for you for hoping that people will actually get back to it and go over it again.
Yeah.
I'm in the process now of rereading a lot of stuff and movies, seeing a lot of stuff I have experienced before, but not for a long time. And it's wonderful. It's really wonderful to rediscover things from a different standpoint. And the older you get, the longer you've been around, the more stuff you've observed, the more interesting that process becomes. We all work for history because we all are being reprinted because the publishers have to, because the publishers need money in order to pay for the new stuff. So God bless you. Read it over and over again as your life and your time will allow.
Yeah. I'm going to throw in one more thing here, which is I throw a lot of things into my comics, but I also, beyond just not minding if people don't catch what I throw in the comics, I also don't mind if they're totally wrong about what they think I'm throwing into it. And
sure.
Yeah. The thing about art, this is the one, for me at least, the big thing that separates art from science is that we're not throwing like equations at them and things that have to be done exactly perfectly. Or like my dad was a medical doctor. If he made a mistake inside of where a nerve was, somebody was paralyzed for life. If I made a mistake on where a muscle goes, if it looks good, that's fine. But so I can be really imprecise. I can be very mysterious, and we're not giving people a single message. I hate it when things get really pedantic, didactic. If you have a single message and you try to bash the reader over the head with it, because that's the only thing that piece of artwork says. The thing you want to do with a piece of art, or at least I try to do, is you try to give the reader tools they can use that they can then apply to life and to how they look at the world and change how they look at the world. And they may not use that tool or take a lesson from it that you expect them to. But if you've thrown enough tools at them that are interesting enough and useful enough, they'll do interesting things with their lives with the tools you gave them.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. You have no idea how the reader's going to respond. And obviously you can't cover for every different reader.
Yeah.
And sometimes the way they're going to approach your work is in ways you hadn't anticipated. So you learn from that as well.
I'm gonna post this comment that Bill had, and I kind of had the same opinion. Did you ever have somebody, a fan or editor, who came up to you, on the opposite side and just said, "This is, the sky's obviously purple when it's yellow." Have you ever had that situation? And then how have you ever dealt with that?
Well, okay. Bill specifically mentioned Adam Hughes, so I'm just going to give a story there, which is the big battle for Adam is not editors telling him to stop drawing boobs. It's editors who don't believe he can draw things other than boobs.
Right.
And, him fighting to get the chance to draw Nick Fury, or fighting for a chance to draw Captain America, and no large boob characters in the story or the cover at all. That's his real struggle, because he does it all beautifully.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is something that is fair. But
me.
I also kind of wanted to talk on something you were mentioning earlier. Well, I want to go back to this first, because this is that 10-page short that you did with Archie Goodwin. I know in Showcase 95, and I know that story meant a lot to you, and it's something you have a lot of. In could you tell the audience, like, how did that come about, where you did this book? Because you had already done some stuff for Marvel, I think, and you did some stuff for DC, and then how did this come about for you?
Archie contacted me and offered to let me draw a story with any writer he could bring on board. So I told him the first choice, and this is around 1995. My top choice would be, I would love to work someday with Alan Moore. And he said, well, Alan's not working with DC anymore. And then I told him my honest option for my second option, which was, I would love to work with you. I really love your writing. And he thought I was joking at first, or just buttering up. And it's like, no, you have done some amazing things over the years. I want to work with you. And then he wrote a short story for me of Arkham Asylum. And it's a story without Batman in it. And it was just amazing, both getting that script from him, which I loved, and then him explaining to me how to tell a story that emotionally complex, and not just make it too pin-up-y, which is a little bit the direction I was going at that point, of just like, everything has to look cool. It's the 90s. Everything's extreme. Everything's awesome. And he's like, okay, hold off. You're going to get to do all that stuff, but just wait till the scene where everything is extreme and awesome. And it was just brilliant the way he did it. It was like you mentioned Citizen Kane, and it in my head, it was kind of like the experience of getting to learn from how to be a film director from Orson Welles, and just him explaining how the mechanics of how Citizen Kane works, or something like that. It was just amazing.
Archie, I had the extreme fortune of having an office next to Archie's. Now, in that particular building, because DC moves every couple of weeks, in that particular building in New York, we had 8 corner offices. It's pretty cool for a building. But the way they designed it was there was like 8 corner offices. And my corner office was next to Archie's corner office. And we both thought that was hilarious. But Archie is one of the best writers and best editors ever to walk the earth. And everybody learned from Archie's work and from working with Archie. So that's a great opportunity that you have. And the last few weeks I worked at DC, Archie thought it would just be great if we went out to lunch as often as we could. And he was going through the whole cancer thing at that time. And any time, any opportunity you have to work with one of the masters of the form, you take that opportunity. And we all know that. You don't goof off on that. You know, I had the opportunity to work with Will Eisner, to work with I shared an office with Denny O'Neil for 3 years. I mean, it was a big office and we had a couch. But I learned a lot about writing and about editing from sharing that office. So that's a great opportunity that you do not want to pass up. And the greatest way to get to work with a writer is to say, well, if I can't work with Alan Moore, how about you?
I mean, you did work with Alan Moore too, so there's that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that must have been a fascinating experience when you realized that phone book of a script that Alan was going to be sending you, because that's what Alan does, is going to blow your mind. It's going to take you 3 times as long to get through that script as does anybody else's. And it's going to be worth every second of it. You know, it's going to be worth the effort.
I've been lucky that every time I've gotten an incredibly brutal script, it's because I pick writers whose work I love. So therefore, even if it takes me, I'm going to say the current Gail Simone script I'm doing right now is kicking my butt. But also it's totally worth it because it is such a beautiful script. But okay, I'm going to hold this up again. The main character is Crab Louie from Patton Oswalt's Minor Threats, where every part of his body is a different bit of a crustacean. And because of the person I am, I'm going to define which species of crustacean is which part of the body, and then draw it for every scene. And I keep thinking, like, normally if I do a headshot, I'm super fast at human heads. And that's the easiest part of a page for me. Insanely fast at human heads. And then I do that with Crab Louie, and it's a crowd shot of crustaceans. Yeah. And suddenly it's like, oh, this is taking forever. This is the slowest page ever. But it's worth it. The Gail Simone story is so good.
Okay.
I want
Let me know if you need anything.
Quiet. Sorry, Apple.
I mean, you have all those little heads on top of those pencils over there.
Oh yeah, but one of the things I like doing is doing free sketches for kids, and the thing I most usually offer is I'll do a headshot of anything, because I know I can do a headshot super fast while the kid's waiting there, and the kid won't go insane.
Yeah.
But also, if I want to, the thing I use the heads for is essentially if I'm trying to do a distinctive head and not make everyone look the same, and especially from an unusual angle or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I came up in the 90s, and one of the first stories I drew for Marvel was a Storm story inside of X-Men Annual number 3. And at that time, every artist drawing the X-Men drew Storm as a white woman with brown skin. And I really regret that I went along with that. And I've been trying to move away from that tradition of the Mad Magazine Don Martin. Everyone has exactly the same head and different hairstyles. I've been trying to move away from that for the rest of my career.
I want to talk about something that is kind of pop culture related, and it affects you. And I don't know. Did you watch X-Men 97?
I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it all the way through.
Okay, well, if there is ever a second season, it will affect.
Or third season, isn't it? Yeah.
No, second season. Because
Oh, no, you're right. Okay, second season. Okay.
But the teases at the end of the second season definitely throws Scott and Jean towards the Ascani. And this will be part of that next season if that happens. So you may end up with tons of toxic fandom showing up if that happens.
Yeah, I
want to talk. I love this story. And I love the work you did on Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix. And you had mentioned to me when you with that showcase that was like the height of your cross hatching, but you really started to lean into it here in those issues, in those series. When you were approached to do that was one of your first like real solid runs. How was that for you? How did you approach that?
Like there's kind of an evolution of when I came up into comics, it was I call it the dark ages of American comic book coloring.
Sure.
Yeah, and they'd moved away from the 64 different colors, the simple 4-color process stuff, and then they were looking for people who knew how to use Photoshop, and that was more important than knowing color theory and painting. So the colors looked really awful at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And also it was the time when the style that eventually became the early Image superhero comic style was still at Marvel and just literally called the style when I broke into the industry. So like an editor once told me like, oh, we've got you an editor or an inker, and he draws in the style. And I was so confused. And the idea was you could take any drawing I did in pencil and make it look like a Todd McFarlane drawing or a Rob Liefeld drawing, which I was totally against. And the style of the time was very heavily cross-hatched, and I wanted to use the cross-hatching to make not as a regular rhythmic way of kind of always putting exactly the same lines on the forehead in these places, no matter what the lighting. I wanted to express lighting and shading and stuff like that. So the tighter and tighter cross-hatching was a way of fighting against inkers who wanted to turn my drawings into Todd McFarlane. God bless Todd McFarlane. I love his art, but I don't want to draw like him. And also to fight against really bad comic book coloring with really dumb gradations and really rude colors. And I wanted the black and white to tell exactly the story I wanted it to tell. Sorry, go ahead.
One of the guys who wrote eloquently about color theory was Schrodinger when he didn't have a cat.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
And now I'm into quantum physics because how can I avoid not being into a form of science that nobody understands, including the people who participate in it? If you know what quantum mechanics is all about, you're wrong. It's just that simple. So of course I can't avoid that. So when I started following Schrodinger's stuff, it's like, wow, now you're telling me color theory? You're teaching me how color theory works? Wow, that's really cool. However, not as cool as Howard Chaykin, who we discussed earlier, because Howard is colorblind.
Oh.
So So when he's coloring something, it's like, and now for my next trick, he knows it all intellectually. And wow, that's amazing. That's just breathtaking.
Oh
man, yeah.
I just compared Howard Chaykin to Schrodinger, for crying out loud. So work on that.
I'm not gonna top that one, but I do find it interesting. You brought up brought up inkers, and when you are there inking relationships, pencil or inker relationships that you value, that you've had in your career?
Oh yeah.
And I know I say that because like I was just noticing, like, so the Adventures, the first series, the Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, you had a lot of inkers,
Yeah.
and good ones. But on the second series, the Ascani Sun series, it was Andrew Peepoy for the whole of it. So like, does that make a difference where you have one person, you know, on the book versus others for you as a penciler?
Yeah, I mean, like I loved all my early experiences before Cyclones Phoenix, I had kind of often was fighting my inker, and I don't want to name names, but yeah, there's a lot of bad experiences there. But then when I got to Cyclops and Phoenix, actually, I did really love all the inkers, and they all had different styles, which is a little weird because they all drew a little differently. So there's Terry Austin, there's Alvey, and there's Andrew Peepoy.
Well, Joseph Rubinstein also did some of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would be happy to work with any of them. I'll just say that Terry Austin was already a legend. Alvey was very much in demand. And Andrew Peepoy was in demand, but not as in much of demand as the others. And I loved his work. So yeah, I was happy to have him be my inker for quite a few years before I decided I'm a control freak and I need to take control of the inks and do it myself at this point. Because like if you look at the Archie Goodwin story, it's all inked by me, and it's using super precise Gene Haas face 2 inches away from the paper inking techniques back when that actually still worked. And then it's so insane that instead of just doing black ink cross hatching, so hatching is used doing a bunch of lines to indicate a shadow. Cross hatching is then crossing it with more lines to make a deeper shadow. That's where the cross comes from. I did cross hatching with white paint to soften the shadows, and you'll see the lines fading away into little dots, like on a dollar bill or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted that level of control, and that wasn't the fault of the inkers so much. That was the fault of the colorists, because it was so hard to get good coloring at that point.
Well, what do you think of coloring today? Like
the really great colorists. Oh yeah, there's so many really great colorists today, and the main qualification isn't knowing Photoshop or some other type of digital thing. Any artist can learn that stuff nowadays. The main qualification is you have to actually be good at coloring, and it's gotten really good. Like the top people are amazing, and I would never have gone down the path I did with inking if I could have depended on colorists the way that artists can now.
It's a very big shift, I think, in the visual aspect of comics, in the you know, when you were younger and even before you were in the industry, and I said this before, but I'll say it again, the penciler would rely on the inker or finisher to finish the panel, whereas today where there aren't inkers, where a penciler is just drawing, you know, they rely on the colorist for the backgrounds, for the details, where in the past,
which drives me crazy.
I understand. I'm not a huge fan of it. I like it the other way. I like where there's
it's partially a transitional problem that we're kind of past.
I think it's still there.
Well, I said kind of. You know, I mean, some people are beginning to figure it out. But when the coloring revolution, and it's really, as far as comics are concerned, it's a complete revolution. When that started to come about, a lot of people didn't know how to draw for it. And certainly a lot of editors and production people and stuff, you know, because it was all brand new stuff. So you'd leave it more open for color than you would have otherwise. Perhaps some people did that. And the first thing to go or to be lessened were some of the backgrounds. And you know, the colors would do very interesting things with backgrounds, and that's great. But backgrounds are there for a reason, to establish verisimilitude, if nothing else. And Bob and I have talked about this before, and we've talked about it personally a lot. So obviously, this is something that annoys the two of us. But you need backgrounds. You don't need to be crowded, but you need to establish where you are and what you're doing. If somebody is walking down the street, you got to see the stores, or you got to see the apartments, or something, so that you know that the guy's walking down the street. Just that simple.
Yeah.
By the way, you're working with Andrew Peeploy does have one advantage that you did not mention. If you don't like what he's doing, you can drive over and talk it over with him. Very
I'm currently working with a colorist on my work he lives about a 30-minute drive south of me, and it's nice being able to conference with him. And just I'll take him out to lunch and talk about stuff.
I'll bet. If they outlawed lunches entirely, first of all, I'd never go back to Chicago. But and Gene knows why. But the second is that the comics industry would just totally evaporate, as would most of Hollywood. If not for lunches, nothing creative would ever get done.
Oh man,
that's fair. That's a good one. I think that goes on the list. If not for lunches, nothing creative would ever get done.
Okay, I'm going to do an old man nostalgia thing, but I kind of miss when even the biggest conventions were incredibly tiny by modern standards, and the people running a convention could afford to pay for dinner for everyone in Artist Alley, and we'd all go out to dinner together.
Oh yeah,
and you meet this weird diversity of like people you would never meet at a Marvel convention at the same meal, and you just trade ideas and tips and become friends and stuff like that. And some people are doing humor comics, and people doing superhero comics, and people doing Barbie comics, and just we'd all become friends. It was amazing.
Well, because sooner or later, most of us will be involved in those other types of comics anyway, eventually, because it's kind of cool. And if you're given an opportunity to do something neat that you've never done before, you're going to think that one over seriously. But I have a story to tell you about dinner at lunch. And this was 40 years ago when we started First Comics. Our first books were out already. And we were at the Chicago Comic-Con. And Jim Shooter wanted to take a lot of people out to dinner. He comes up to me and he says, "Where's a great place for dinner?" I said, "Well, the best place I can think of is a place called Lowry's, which isn't there in Chicago anymore, though it's still in San Diego, which was prime rib. I mean, if you were a vegan, forget it." And they were excellent. They were just wonderful. And they charged accordingly. They were in one of the old McCormick mansions. It was just a beautiful building, wonderful dinner. Everybody was just thrilled. And Jim invited about 40 people to this dinner. And back then, and I'm talking 40 years ago, the average meal ticket there was about, I'm guessing, about 60, 70 bucks. More if you're drinking alcohol. And at the end of the day, that meal cost Marvel Comics several $1,000s. So I didn't know whether to avoid Jim or not, because I've charged several $1,000s to my expense account at DC, and I heard about it. So, I wanted to be cool. I didn't know he was going to invite so many people. Jim, to his credit, loved it. He loved the food. He loved the atmosphere, and everybody had a great time. The food was fantastic. And that might have just single-handedly killed everybody's expense account, though.
Well, I am not surprised that that you would be responsible for the death of an expense account.
Well, actually, it was Warner Brothers, not me. When Warner Brothers took over control of DC, you had to play by Warner Brothers rules, which were even more stupid than Warner Publishing was beforehand. Huh. You could not tip more than 15%. pre-tax,
Oh,
according to Warner Brothers. Well, in Manhattan, 15% tip pre-tax will get you killed. I'm not kidding. We had many a server take. So I started to just pad my expense account or add my expense account to whatever 15% was plus 25 cents. And it was exactly 25 cents each and every time. So some guy comes down from accounting and says, look, I get what you're doing. I can't change the rules. You're driving me crazy. I apologized, but I didn't stop. So about 3 weeks later, Giordano calls me into his office and he says, listen, about your expense account. And I start laughing. And I go, yeah, okay, I probably milk this one as long as I can. I will admit defeat. He says, admit defeat? You overcharged a quarter for every one of these meals. I do a half a buck. I love Dick. Giordano is such a wonderful guy.
That's great. That's great. I do want to come back before we run out of time here and talk a little bit about May and how you got into, what we're going to get. Again, it's April. I want to put that on people's schedule. If you do get your comics from comic book shops, you want to get ahead of it now, because I don't know if it's out. I don't know if it's quite solicited yet, but I know it's definitely up on the
solicited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you should be able to pre-order it at your local comic shop. It is absolutely worthy. Are you planning on going to ALA this year?
Not this year. Though I would like to make if there are any librarians, actually not even just librarians, teachers, or even anybody who just has their own personal book club, which is just 3 or 4 geeks who just all met each other at a comic shop. If you have a book club and you read May as your monthly reading, if you can find an opening in my schedule, which won't be that hard, because if you can do it, especially on weekdays, I will video conference for free with your book club if you want to ask any questions.
That's great. That's great news. Yep.
That's really wonderful. Gene, that's terrific.
Yeah, library, schools, or just random book clubs.
All right, that's terrific. That's so people actually get together and say, I really hate this book. Let's get the guy who did it.
Oh, that's.
I mean, there's something communal about. I'm sorry. Go ahead. You got it.
Oh, I find it really interesting getting negative comments. My view is that people's opinions about any piece of art or a comic book is not always right. But as a creator, you will learn something from their criticism. It may not be what they think they're saying, but you're going to find out. Yeah, you're going to find out how they read and what they take out of what they want from a comic and what they're not getting out of the comic.
That's very true.
You may not want to provide that to them, but
no, that's really important. You should write that on like every piece of work you do. That's really critical. It's really important, and also getting out there before the fans and talking with them. And I say fans like a positive thing. Getting the negative feedback is important too, as long as everybody's being polite, including the talent who's receiving the comment. But it's absolutely critical to be out there. That's why comic book conventions have changed the medium. It didn't organize fandom as much as it did organize our literary criticism of our work, because we got all that input from the people who actually consume it. And having been on both sides of that one and still being on both sides of that one, I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. That's great.
We do have a question from one of our viewers. He wants to know, is there a real criticism from a fan that you take to heart and not consider a flame comment? Like, has there ever been a time where a fan has criticized something that you've taken seriously, that you see something in that?
Oh, I mean, if you don't like highly detailed, highly textured art, some of those people will just say Gene Ha's art is not for me, and there are Dean Haspiels in the world who are making the perfect art for you, and I love Dean's artwork too. I'm a big fan of my collaborator Xander Cannon. He is not a detail guy either. Oh man, I'm just gonna give a counterexample, who's kind of neither fish nor fowl. Katie Cook. A lot of detail, not the type of detail I throw in, and even more Easter eggs than I throw in, but also completely different way of looking at the world visually than the way I do. If that's the kind of criticism you have, that is completely valid criticism. I have a relatively realistic, relatively kind of photographic tracing type of style, even though I don't mostly trace photos, except on things like cars or sometimes guns or things like that. But if that's not for you, if you want something of kind of a heightened reality and the way like an anatomy and structures and like perspective and like just really pushing it, I love that stuff too, and I appreciate the fact that I'm not the person to bring that to you. If you just want more boobs, I mean, Adam Hughes will provide that to you, but he also wants to do other things too, so please let him do it.
Yeah.
Also, sometimes somebody's going to point something out in your work, and they're going to see it as a mistake.
Yeah.
And you're going to realize for the first time that they're right. It happens. We're human. We make mistakes. Sometimes we're inhuman and we make mistakes, but nonetheless, somebody's going to catch it. It's the first thing you learn in journalism school. Screw up and you're going to hear about it.
I remember a big experience for me and shaping how I draw things was reading a letter column a little bit after I got into the industry, where a reader from Brazil, I can't remember his last name right now, but he's actually friends of mine. Ivan, I haven't seen him in ages. Complained about how in the Flash story, the Flash ran across from north to south, across North America to South America, ran through Brazil, and the streets of Brazil were people with handlebar mustaches and Mexican sombreros. And he said, "Can you please do more research? That's not what we look like in Brazil. We don't wear those hats. We don't wear some, the ponchos and stuff like that." So
that's great.
Knowing people in Brazil or all over the world might read my story and I might draw their country and draw it wrong has been like a lingering fear of like, I don't want to screw that up.
If you get verisimilitude, I mentioned that earlier. If you get something wrong, chances are great that somebody knows better and is going to catch it. And the problem isn't that they're going to bitch about it or whatever. I mean, that's how you learn. The problem is that for that reader, your story stops at that point because you've broken the train of thought. You've broken the moment. You've done something wrong. One of my favorite rock musicians these days is Psychobilly's own Reverend Horton Heat. Love the guy's stuff. And on his latest album, he has a great song about how the cacti that we associate with Texas, none of them are actually in Texas. Arizona, yes, but those cactuses don't exist in Texas. So stop making Texas look like that. It's not right. It's a very polite and extremely funny song. But quite frankly, I didn't know that. If I were drawing a scene set in a Texas desert, I probably would have just habitually used those cactuses. Now, the fact of the matter is, here it is at 9:33 and on a Tuesday evening, and the three of us and all you folks out there in the ether are listening to me babble about cactuses and getting it right. But that's the job.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm actually kind of curious, like you're on this theory of it, because I'm afraid of that, but then sometimes things work even though they get it completely wrong. Like a really obvious example of the cactus problem you're talking about is the John Wayne movie, The Searchers,
Mhm.
which is supposed to be on a cattle ranch in Texas. And so you see John Wayne on this ranch with all these cattle, and if you look outside, it's pure rocky desert with no grass.
Yeah.
And then there's these giant Monument Valley, Arizona rock formations, which aren't in Texas. And it's kind of like, this is taking me a little bit out of the story because, first of all, the cattle are going to either get dehydrated and die or are going to starve and die. And there's no place in Texas that looks like that part of Arizona.
That's right.
But also, it was
Well,
a
it's a lot-
beautiful movie.
It's a lot easier to drive from Los Angeles to Arizona than it is to get to Texas.
Yeah, and if you had done it on a flat, grassy plain in Texas, yeah, no one would have been like, "Oh man, that movie really took me somewhere." So I don't have the daring. I think it was John Ford who directed that one. I don't have the daring to do anything that bold for artistic reasons. I wish I did have the guts to do it, and the judgment to do it. I don't think I have the judgment to make that work.
I mean, one of the things about your art, and is that, and this is something that you see evolve in your career to this point. You have become a master of it. Is and we mentioned it earlier, the detail that you put into it, and the research that you spend. It's part of the job. You can't, anybody can put a pen on paper, but and you can people have different aspects of talent, but whatever you're doing that's artistic is effort and it's work. And if you put the effort and the work into it, is really where you're going to get the better results from.
But let us also remember that Hollywood at that moment in time was not going to take on John Ford, not even at that moment in time, not even with John Wayne. Because when they were trying to get rid of the blacklist, John Ford, who was every bit to the right as John Wayne, said, enough of this, let these people work. And Wayne started bitching about communism, the communist threat. He became his own cliche. And Ford just told him to shut the fuck up. In public meeting. And John Wayne did. So nobody's going to tell John Ford, oh, yeah, you screwed that up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think even like Texas cattle ranchers probably looked at that movie and just said, that's obviously not Texas, but I like it.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to go with it. He's John Ford.
Bottom line in all storytelling is, does it work?
Yeah.
Are you telling a story? And you can get away with murder that way. Hopefully not literally.
Yeah.
Well,
oh man.
We're running out of time here tonight, and I appreciate you being here, Gene. It's been a great conversation, and we are really looking forward to May. And we're looking forward to the other thing has that been announced yet? The thing that you've been.
Oh, yeah. I was showing you peeks of the images that haven't been officially released yet, but
you don't have to show us things that we're going to get you in trouble for. But you're doing it's in the
I think they're okay with it.
The Minor Threats universe.
Yeah, it's a Welcome to Twilight. It's a one shot, kind of like one issue creative teams series of short stories about different characters from the Minor Threats universe. Yeah, and our book is Gail Simone and me working on stuff. I'm just going to throw you one more kind of images pretty early on in the book.
There.
Let me see. Yeah, just.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
nice. That's good. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, he's a god of crustaceans in a sense, or a swamp thing of crustaceans. So he also had little tiny crabs in the foreground worshiping me.
Hang on a second. Hang on. Just hold that for 1 second. Holy crap.
Yes.
That's a lot. That's a lot, Gene. It's a lot.
Yeah.
You had me when you mentioned Gail's name. You already had me when you mentioned your name. But, that's a team I want to read forever. And I don't even know if that story's any damn good.
Well, I'm pretty sure it is.
It's, the funny thing is, like, Gail is like, when she sees some of the pages, she'll be reacting like, "Oh my god, I wish I could rewrite the script." And I'm just like, and bring it up to the art. And I'm like, Gail, this is all stuff that was in the script that I'm just bringing out. This is all inherent in the story you wrote. And
That's right.
I'm just going crazy with it because you just gave me a license to do it.
Gail is a wonderful human being. On the other hand, so are you. You are both very gifted. I know you better than I know Gail, but I know Gail just fine. And you're both two of the humans I would want to see if I only had a list of 10 humans I can see for the rest of my life. You two are on that. And Gene, Bob and I may be in Chicago around the time May is released for C2E2. And we haven't, I don't think we've worked out the details yet. But if so, of course, I'm going to try to hammer one of those lunches together.
Nice.
And I sure hope you're there.
Yeah, I think I will be. So
I sure hope you're there. That would be just.
Oh.
Those lunches are wonderful. Bob's been to one.
Okay.
I've been to one. I was at one. Yeah. So issue 2. So you're doing issue 3 of that volume.
Yeah.
And issue 1 comes out in March. So April or May, probably that should be there for the Welcome to Twilight.
Yeah. I need to hustle. I'm a slow artist, and every crab Louis head I draw is killing me, but it's worth it.
Good. We're looking forward to it. Again, Gene, thanks so much for being here, and hopefully we'll see you soon in person. And we would look forward to getting our hands on May, the definitive edition.
It feels impossible to believe it now, but seeing you guys in person will be more fun than seeing you right now on not Zoom.
Well, but we won't be able to see your ceiling.
Good
Gene, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. This was every bit as entertaining as I had expected it to be, and I have very high expectations.
Okay, so I'm assuming I'm going to be able to make the lunch, and I'm going to insist to our Chicago crew that we find an eatery with a really beautiful ceiling.
I can think of a couple.
Excellent.
That's a challenge. I like that. All right. Oh, look at all these people. Thank you, folks.
Thank you, Gene.
Thanks, Gene.
All right, folks. We're almost out of time here. Thanks everybody for being here, for watching, for listening, for contributing. Really love it. We are going to be here next week. I don't know if we're going to have an extra special guest. We might. Still up for grabs. If not, it'll just be Mike and I. The following week,
I'm awaiting to hear from our proposed guest.
Yeah, well, that'll be that. We will let you know if that happens. But the following week, we definitely have a guest. It is going to be Erica Schultz. So we're going to be talking to her in a couple of weeks. And we'll be here next week, every Tuesday for you guys. We have some other things that are getting scheduled for later in March. We are going to throw, and we'll get the details for you next week. But we're going to throw a tease at you in the middle of February and throw you a Monday show that we need to.
Monday.
I know. Well, the thing is, our guest can't stay up too late on Tuesdays, but we need to get this guest on.
Okay.
So we're going to do it. I believe we're going to do it on President's Day. So we're going to have a Canadian on, which will be good.
If there's still Canada, yes.
Well, there you go.
We're absolutely hoping that there is.
Yeah. All right. So everybody,
thank you all for being out here and putting up with our silliness.
Yep. And we will see you guys next week.
All right.
See you later.
Take it easy.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?